Billionaire abandoned his twin sons at birth. 20 years later, they returned for shocking revenge. "You're our father." Julian's voice exploded across the boardroom like a gunshot. Nathaniel Blackstone's face went white as paper. "Yes. And you just sat there for 3 months while we planned to destroy your company? I didn't know who you were until yesterday." Gabriel's laugh was ice cold. "But you know now. And you think that changes anything?" "I think it changes everything." "The only thing that's changed," Julian snarled, stepping closer, "is now we know exactly why our mother cried herself to sleep every night for 5 years. Have you ever wondered what happens when abandoned children grow up rich, powerful, and hungry for revenge? When they walk into their father's office 20 years later with enough evidence to destroy everything he's built? Well, today you're about to find out. Because what you just heard was the moment billionaire Nathaniel Blackstone discovered that his worst nightmare had a name. 2 names, actually. Gabriel and Julian Winters. The twin sons he abandoned as babies, who just spent 6 months systematically dismantling his empire from the inside. But here's the twist that will blow your mind. The revenge they planned isn't the revenge they got. What happened in that room changed all 3 men forever, and it's about to change how you think about forgiveness, family, and the price we pay for our worst mistakes. If you believe the past always catches up, smash that like button right now, because this story proves that some secrets are too big to stay buried. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 20 years ago, in a Miami hospital room, when one man's cowardice set 3 lives on a collision course with destiny. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Augustine Hospital like bullets against glass. Lightning split the dark Miami sky, illuminating the chaos of the emergency room below. But on the 3rd floor, in room 314, a different kind of storm was brewing. Isabella Moreau lay exhausted against white pillows, her 19-year-old face glowing with that unique radiance that only new mothers possess. In her arms, she cradled 2 identical baby boys, their tiny fists wrapped around her fingers like they never wanted to let go. "Gabriel and Julian," she whispered in her soft French accent, pressing gentle kisses to their foreheads. "Mes petits anges. My little angels." The babies stirred at the sound of their names, and Isabella's heart swelled with a love so fierce it took her breath away. She had never felt anything like this before. Pure, protective, unconditional love that would move mountains if necessary. "You're going to have everything," she murmured to them. "Love, family, a father who will teach you to be good men." As if summoned by her words, the door to the hospital room creaked open. Nathaniel Blackstone stepped inside, his expensive coat dripping rainwater onto the sterile floor. At 28, he was already wealthy beyond most people's dreams, his tech startup having just secured its 3rd round of funding. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the storm, and his gray eyes held that confident gleam of a man who had never truly failed at anything. But tonight, those same gray eyes were filled with something Isabella had never seen before. Fear. Nathaniel froze in the doorway, his gaze fixed on the 2 babies in Isabella's arms. For a moment, just a moment, his expression softened. These were his sons. His blood. His legacy. "They're beautiful," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. Isabella's face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. "They are, aren't they? Come closer. They need to meet their papa." Nathaniel took a hesitant step forward, then another. The babies seemed to sense his presence, their dark eyes opening to study this new face. Gabriel, the slightly larger twin, reached out with a tiny hand, and Nathaniel felt his breath catch in his throat. "This one has your chin," Isabella said softly, adjusting Gabriel in her arms. "And Julian, he has your eyes. See how serious he looks already." For a heartbeat, Nathaniel allowed himself to imagine it. Coming home to this. Watching his sons take their first steps. Teaching them to throw a baseball. Walking them down the aisle at their weddings. The life they could build together. Then lightning flashed again, and in the window's reflection, Nathaniel saw not a happy family, but a disaster waiting to happen. He saw board meetings where investors would whisper about his mixed-race children. He saw his mother's disapproving face. He saw his carefully constructed image crumbling like a house of cards. "Isabella," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need to talk." Something in his tone made her stomach clench with dread. "What's wrong?" "This." He gestured vaguely at the babies, at her, at everything. "I can't do this." Isabella's world tilted sideways. "What do you mean you can't do this?" "These are your sons, Nathaniel. Our sons. I know what they are." His voice cracked like breaking glass. "But you don't understand what this means for me. My company is about to go public. The scrutiny, the questions, the background checks. I can't afford any complications right now." The word hit Isabella like a physical blow. "Complications? You're calling your own children complications?" Nathaniel ran his hands through his hair, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "You don't get it, Isabella. My investors are conservative. My mother sits on 3 charity boards. The lifestyle section of Business Week is planning a feature on me next month. I can't have questions about my personal life derailing everything I've worked for." Isabella clutched her babies closer, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "So what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying I can't be part of this. I can't claim them. I can't marry you." Each word felt like a knife twisting in his own chest, but fear had taken the wheel now, and fear was a terrible driver. "You're walking away," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're actually walking away from your own children." "I'll send money," Nathaniel said desperately, hating himself with every word. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll want for nothing, I promise. But I can't be seen with you. I can't acknowledge them publicly." Isabella's tears turned to something harder, colder. "Get out. Isabella, please try to understand. I said get out." Her voice rose to a scream that woke both babies, their cries filling the room like accusations. "If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back. Don't you dare try to find us when guilt finally catches up to your cowardly heart." Nathaniel stood frozen, his hand on the door handle. This was it. The moment that would define the rest of his life. He could stay and face the consequences, or he could run and spend forever wondering what if. Thunder crashed overhead like the sound of God's judgment, and Nathaniel chose to run. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words were lost in the storm and the baby's cries and Isabella's broken sobs. He stepped out into the hallway and let the door close behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything good in the world. Isabella held her sons closer as their father's footsteps faded down the hospital corridor. "It's okay, Mes Angies," she whispered through her tears. "It's just us now. But I promise you, I will love you enough for 10 fathers. You will never doubt that you are wanted." Outside, lightning continued to split the sky, and the storm raged on. But inside room 314, a different kind of storm was just beginning. One that would take 20 years to finally break. For the next 5 years, Isabella Moreau did exactly what she promised. She loved her sons with the fierce devotion of a lioness protecting her cubs. She worked double shifts at the art gallery downtown, saving every penny for their future. She read to them every night, taught them to speak French, filled their small apartment with laughter and music and hope. Gabriel grew into a thoughtful, serious child who asked endless questions about everything. Julian was fire to his brother's ice, passionate and protective and quick to defend anyone he loved. They were inseparable, 2 halves of the same whole, and Isabella's pride in them knew no bounds. But life has a way of testing even the strongest love. On a humid October evening, Isabella was closing up the Meridian Gallery where she worked as an assistant curator. Gabriel and Julian, now 5 years old, sat quietly in the corner, coloring pictures of the paintings they'd been admiring all day. "Mama, look," Gabriel said proudly, holding up his drawing. "I made the lady in the blue dress smile bigger." "That's beautiful, mon cœur," Isabella said, but her mind was elsewhere. The gallery's owner had been hinting about budget cuts, and Isabella knew that as the newest employee, she'd be the first to go. She needed this job. Without it, she and the boys would lose their apartment. Her phone rang, startling her from her worried thoughts. "Isabella? Thank God I reached you." Her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was tight with panic. "There's a fire. Your building is on fire." Isabella's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean a fire?" "It started in the apartment below you. The fire department is here, but they're saying the whole building might be a total loss." "I'm so sorry, honey." Isabella sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Everything they owned was in that apartment. Their clothes, their toys, their photographs. The paintings Isabella had been working on in her spare time, hoping to sell at the local art fair. Their entire life, reduced to ash. "Mama, what's wrong?" Julian's voice was small and worried. Isabella looked at her boys, so innocent, so trusting that she would fix whatever was wrong. "Nothing, my loves. Everything will be fine." But everything was not fine. The insurance company found reasons to deny most of their claim. The temporary housing vouchers lasted only 30 days. Isabella's savings, small to begin with, evaporated like morning dew as she struggled to find them a new place to live. It was her cousin Marie who finally offered a solution, though it felt more like a sentence. "Send the boys to me in New York," Marie said over the phone. "Just temporarily, until you get back on your feet. I have a big house, good schools nearby." "It makes sense, Isabella. I can't be separated from my children," Isabella said, but even as she spoke, she was looking at Gabriel and Julian sleeping on the floor of the homeless shelter, using their backpacks as pillows. "It's only for 6 months, Marie insisted. Maybe less. You can rebuild your life, find a new job, a new apartment. Then you bring them home." Isabella stared at her sleeping sons and felt her heart breaking all over again. She couldn't give them what they needed. She couldn't even give them a bed to sleep in. 3 days later, she stood in Miami International Airport, watching her boys board a plane to New York. Gabriel clung to her hand until the very last second. "You're coming to get us soon, right, Mama?" he asked, his gray eyes wide and trusting. "Soon, mon ange. Mama promises." Julian, ever the protector despite being 5 years old, squeezed her tight. "Don't be sad, Mama. We'll be good boys for Cousin Marie." Isabella watched the plane taxi away until it disappeared into the clouds, taking her heart with it. She had no way of knowing it would be the last time she would ever see her sons. 6 months turned into a nightmare. Isabella found a job in a small studio apartment. She was preparing to bring the boys home when the unthinkable happened. Driving to work one rainy morning, she was hit by a drunk driver running a red light. The impact broke her pelvis, shattered her left leg, and put her in a coma for 3 weeks. When she woke up in the hospital, disoriented and in agony, the first thing she asked for was her children. "Isabella, honey," the nurse said gently, "you need to rest. You've been unconscious for almost a month." "My boys. I need to call my boys. They're waiting for me in New York." But when Isabella finally reached Marie's number, it was disconnected. Her cousin had moved, leaving no forwarding address. The temporary custody papers Isabella had signed, intended to last 6 months, had been used to initiate permanent adoption proceedings. By the time Isabella was released from the hospital and hired a lawyer with money she didn't have, Gabriel and Julian Moreau had vanished into the foster care system like ghosts. The records were damaged in a flood, the social worker explained with bureaucratic detachment. "Sometimes paperwork gets lost in situations like this. We're doing everything we can to locate them." But everything wasn't enough. Isabella spent the next 15 years searching. She called hospitals, police stations, schools. She hired private investigators when she could afford them. She never stopped believing that somehow, someway, she would find her boys and bring them home. She never knew that they had been separated and adopted into different families. She never knew that Gabriel had been placed with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a kind pediatrician in Manhattan who recognized his brilliant mind and nurtured his love of learning. She never knew that Julian had gone to Marcus and Diane Foster, successful architects in Boston who channeled his passionate nature into competitive drive. What she did know was that every night for 15 years, she fell asleep clutching a photograph of her 5-year-old sons, whispering the same prayer into the darkness. Please, God, keep them safe. Help them remember that their mama loved them. And if I never see them again, please let them know they were wanted. They were so wanted. Meanwhile, in 2 different cities, 2 young boys grew into men, carrying with them the memory of a mother who had promised to come back for them and never did. They didn't know about the fire, or the accident, or their mother's desperate search. All they knew was the terrible certainty that they had been abandoned twice. Once by their father, and then by their mother. That abandonment shaped them, molded them, turned them into weapons of ambition and success. Gabriel became methodical, brilliant, never letting emotion cloud his judgment. Julian became fierce, protective, never letting anyone close enough to hurt him again. And neither of them ever stopped looking over their shoulder, waiting for the next person they loved to walk away. If you're watching this story and thinking about someone in your life you've been putting off calling, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, do it tonight. Because sometimes the people we love don't get second chances. Drop a comment and tell me about a time when you almost lost someone important. Your story might help someone else realize what they still have time to save. But our story isn't over yet. Because 20 years after that stormy night in Miami, Gabriel and Julian were about to discover that some doors, once closed, can be forced open again. And sometimes, the person on the other side is the last person you ever expected to see. In Manhattan, Gabriel Winters sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, reviewing quarterly reports for his consulting firm. At 25, he had already earned a reputation as the man you called when you needed a failing company brought back to life. His methods were surgical, precise, and ruthlessly effective. But success couldn't fill the empty spaces in his heart. Mr. Winters. His assistant knocked on the door. Your 4 o'clock appointment is here. Gabriel looked up from his computer screen, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. Send them in. The door opened, and Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. The man walking into his office could have been his reflection in a funhouse mirror. Same height, same build, same gray eyes, but with an edge that Gabriel recognized from his own darkest moments. Gabriel Winters. The man extended his hand with a confident smile. I'm Julian Foster. I think we need to talk. Gabriel stood slowly, his analytical mind racing. The resemblance was impossible to ignore, but it was more than that. Something about this man felt familiar in a way that went deeper than appearance. Please, sit down, Gabriel managed, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. What can I do for you? Julian settled into his seat with the fluid grace of a born predator. It's what we can do for each other, actually. I've been following your work, and I think we might be able to help each other with a particular problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves a billionaire who thinks he's untouchable. Julian's smile turned sharp. Tell me, Gabriel, what do you know about Meridian Holdings? Gabriel frowned. He knew Meridian Holdings by reputation. A massive conglomerate with fingers in everything from tech startups to real estate development. I know they're successful. Profitable. Well managed, from what I can tell. That's what they want people to think. Julian pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the desk. But I've been digging, and what I found would make your head spin. Environmental violations, worker exploitation, tax shelters that would make the IRS weep. This company is dirty from top to bottom. Gabriel opened the folder and began scanning the documents. His eyes widened as he took in the scope of what Julian had uncovered. This is incredible work. How did you get access to all this? I have my ways. Julian leaned back in his chair. The question is, are you interested in bringing down one of the most corrupt corporations in America? Gabriel looked up from the papers, his pulse quickening with the thrill of the hunt. What's your angle? Why come to me? Because taking down Meridian Holdings is going to require someone with your particular skill set. Someone who can dismantle their financial structure from the inside. Julian's eyes gleamed with something that might have been vengeance. And because I have a feeling we understand each other in ways most people wouldn't. There it was again. That sense of recognition, of connection that Gabriel couldn't explain. You think we understand each other? I think we're both products of abandonment, Julian said quietly. I think we both learned early that the only person you can count on is yourself. And I think we both have very little patience for powerful men who think the rules don't apply to them. Gabriel felt something shift in his chest. This stranger was reading him like an open book, seeing parts of his soul that Gabriel had never shared with another living person. What exactly are you proposing? Julian smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. I'm proposing we become brothers in arms, Gabriel. I'm proposing we take everything Nathaniel Blackstone thinks he's built and burn it to the ground. Something cold settled in Gabriel's stomach at the mention of that name. Nathaniel Blackstone. He's the CEO of Meridian. Founder and CEO. Self-made billionaire with a reputation for ruthless business practices and zero tolerance for weakness. Julian's voice turned bitter. The kind of man who would step on his own mother if it meant increasing quarterly profits. Gabriel stared at the folder in his hands, his mind spinning. Why is this personal for you? Julian was quiet for a long moment, his confident facade cracking just slightly. Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting to see Nathaniel Blackstone fall. Gabriel nodded slowly. He understood about reasons. He understood about the kind of anger that could burn for decades, waiting for the right moment to explode. All right, Gabriel said finally. I'm in. When do we start? Julian's smile returned, sharp and predatory. We start by becoming indispensable to him. We get inside his company, we learn his weaknesses, and then we destroy him from within. How long do you think it will take? However long it takes. Julian stood and extended his hand again. Partners? Gabriel shook it, feeling like he was signing a pact with the devil himself. Partners. And just like that, two abandoned sons unknowingly joined forces to destroy the father who had thrown them away before they could even walk. The universe, it seemed, had a dark sense of humor. Over the next 6 months, Gabriel and Julian worked together with the synchronicity of two people who had been meant to find each other. Gabriel's strategic brilliance complemented Julian's aggressive tactics perfectly. They secured consulting contracts with 3 of Meridian's subsidiary companies, establishing themselves as rising stars in the corporate world. Julian, using his legal background, identified the regulatory vulnerabilities that could bring the company down. Gabriel, with his financial expertise, mapped out exactly how Meridian's money flowed and where it pooled in legally questionable areas. They were methodical, patient, and absolutely ruthless in their preparation. Every document they needed, every witness they required, every piece of evidence that could damn Nathaniel Blackstone was carefully collected and catalogued. But perhaps most importantly, they became friends. Real friends, in a way that neither of them had ever experienced before. They understood each other's darkest moments, each other's deepest fears. They could communicate with a look across a crowded room, finish each other's sentences in strategy meetings, anticipate each other's next move like they shared the same brain. It's weird, Julian said one night as they worked late in Gabriel's office, Chinese takeout containers scattered across the desk. I feel like I've known you my whole life. Gabriel looked up from the financial statements he was reviewing. I know exactly what you mean. Like we're two pieces of the same puzzle. Maybe we are. Julian tossed his pen down and rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe the universe puts people together when they need each other most. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, thinking about the life he'd lived before Julian walked into his office. Successful but lonely. Driven but hollow. I never had a brother growing up. Neither did I. Julian's voice was soft with something that might have been grief. Sometimes I used to imagine what it would be like, though. Having someone who got it, you know. Someone who understood what it felt like to be thrown away. Well, now you do. Gabriel smiled, and for once, it wasn't calculated or strategic. It was just genuine warmth. Now we both do. They worked in comfortable silence for a while longer, two abandoned children who had found each other 20 years too late and were about to discover that their bond went deeper than either of them could possibly imagine. The plan was perfect. The evidence was overwhelming. And tomorrow, they would walk into Nathaniel Blackstone's office and watch his world crumble around him. They just had no idea that they were about to come face to face with the man who had made them both orphans on the same stormy night 20 years ago. That's the end of our first part. But trust me, what happens when these two brilliant, damaged men finally confront their father will shock you to your core. In the next part, you'll see the moment when all their careful planning collides with a truth none of them saw coming. You'll witness the most brutal emotional confrontation ever captured in a corporate boardroom. And you'll discover that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy, it's forcing them to become worthy of your forgiveness. Make sure you're subscribed because part 2 will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice, family, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. When we left off, two brilliant, damaged men were preparing to destroy a billionaire who had no idea he was about to come face to face with the sons he abandoned 20 years ago. Gabriel and Julian had spent 6 months building the perfect case against Nathaniel Blackstone, collecting evidence that would bring down his entire empire. But as they walked into that boardroom on a gray Tuesday morning in November, none of them knew they were about to participate in the most brutal family reunion in corporate history. The elevator doors opened on the 38th floor of the Meridian Holdings building with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell. Gabriel and Julian stepped out into the sleek reception area, their identical briefcases containing enough evidence to destroy a billionaire. "Good morning, gentlemen," the receptionist said with a practiced smile. "Mr. Blackstone is ready for you in the main conference room." Gabriel nodded politely, but his stomach was churning with anticipation. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. "Thank you." They walked down the hallway lined with expensive artwork and photographs of Nathaniel Blackstone accepting various business awards. Julian studied the photos with barely concealed disgust. "Look at him," Julian muttered under his breath. "Probably never worked an honest day in his life." Gabriel glanced at the images of their target. Nathaniel Blackstone at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at new buildings. Always smiling, always confident, always surrounded by people who hung on his every word. "After today, nobody's going to want to shake that hand," Gabriel replied quietly. The conference room doors were solid oak, imposing and intimidating. Julian reached for the handle and paused. "You ready for this?" he asked Gabriel. Gabriel straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. "I've been ready for this my entire life." They pushed open the doors and stepped into a room that would change all their lives forever. Nathaniel Blackstone sat at the head of a long conference table, reading through quarterly reports. At 58, he was still handsome in the way that money and power can preserve a man. His dark hair was now streaked with silver, and lines of stress had formed around his gray eyes, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never truly failed at anything important. He looked up as they entered, and the world stopped turning. For Nathaniel, it was like seeing ghosts. Two young men who could have stepped out of his own reflection 20 years ago stood before him, and something in his chest cracked like breaking ice. Their faces, their eyes, the way they carried themselves, it was all devastatingly familiar. For Gabriel and Julian, it was simply another powerful man about to fall. They had no idea they were looking at their father. "Gentlemen," Nathaniel managed, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening in his chest. "Please, sit down." Gabriel and Julian took their seats across from him, spreading their documents across the polished table with military precision. "Mr. Blackstone," Gabriel began, his tone professionally courteous. "Thank you for taking this meeting. We have some concerns about Meridian Holdings that we believe need your immediate attention." Nathaniel nodded, but his eyes kept flicking between their faces. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The way Gabriel tilted his head when he spoke, exactly like Nathaniel did. The way Julian's jaw tightened when he was thinking, a mirror of Nathaniel's own unconscious habit. "What kind of concerns?" Nathaniel asked, though his mind was screaming different questions. "Who are these men? Why do they look like me? Why does something about them feel like coming home and facing judgment at the same time?" Julian opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Environmental violations at your Tampa facility. Worker safety issues at 3 of your manufacturing plants. And some very interesting discrepancies in your tax filings over the past 5 years." Gabriel added his own folder to the pile. "We've also uncovered some questionable partnerships with overseas companies that seem to exist primarily on paper." Nathaniel's business instincts kicked in, overriding his emotional confusion. "Those are serious allegations. I hope you have evidence to back them up." "Oh, we have evidence," Julian said, his smile sharp as broken glass. "We have enough evidence to bring your entire company crashing down around your ears." Something in his tone made Nathaniel's spine stiffen. This wasn't a business meeting. This was an execution. "What exactly do you want?" Nathaniel asked carefully. Gabriel leaned forward, his gray eyes cold and calculating. "We want you to step down as CEO. We want a complete restructuring of Meridian Holdings. And we want compensation for every worker you've exploited and every community you've damaged." "And if I refuse?" Julian's laugh was ice cold. "Then tomorrow morning, copies of everything in these folders will be on the desks of every major newspaper, every regulatory agency, and every law enforcement office in the country." Nathaniel studied their faces, these 2 young men who held his entire life in their hands. There was something about them that went beyond professional antagonism. There was something personal burning in their eyes. "This seems very personal for a simple business matter," Nathaniel said quietly. "Maybe it is personal," Julian replied. "Maybe we've had enough of watching powerful men destroy lives without consequences." Gabriel nodded. "Maybe we think it's time for someone like you to face the music for once." Nathaniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Someone like me? Someone who takes what he wants and throws away what he doesn't need," Gabriel said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Someone who thinks other people's lives are disposable." The words hit Nathaniel like physical blows, and suddenly he was 20 years younger, standing in a hospital room, walking away from the only woman he'd ever loved and the children who carried his blood. "Gentlemen," Nathaniel said, his voice beginning to shake. "Before we continue, there's something you need to know about your past." Gabriel's composure cracked slightly. "Our past is irrelevant to this negotiation. Your mother's name was Isabella Moreau." The room fell into electric silence. Julian's jaw clenched like a steel trap. Gabriel went completely still, his face draining of all color. "You have no right to speak that name," Julian started, his voice rising with barely controlled fury. "She never abandoned you." Nathaniel's voice broke like glass. "She searched for you for years. The adoption, the separation, it happened because she was injured and couldn't fight the system alone." Gabriel stood slowly, his hands trembling. "How could you possibly know this?" Nathaniel opened his desk drawer with shaking fingers and pulled out a faded photograph. Isabella at 19, glowing with new motherhood, holding 2 identical babies against her chest. "Because I'm the man who walked away from this family 20 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian stared at the photograph like it was a poisonous snake. Gabriel's face went white as paper. "You're lying," Julian whispered. "I wish I was." Gabriel's voice was barely audible. "You're our father." "Yes." Julian's chair crashed to the floor as he lunged forward, only Gabriel's restraining hand stopping him from violence. "You son of a bitch. You're our father." "Yes. And you just sat there for 3 months while we planned to destroy your company?" Julian's voice was a roar now, echoing off the conference room walls. "I didn't know who you were until yesterday." Nathaniel pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "I had my people run background checks. Your birth certificates, your adoption records. Gabriel and Julian Moreau, born October 15th at St. Augustine Hospital. Adopted separately after your mother's accident." Gabriel sank back into his chair like he'd been shot. "This is impossible. I've spent 20 years wondering what happened to you," Nathaniel said, tears beginning to stream down his face. 20 years of guilt and regret and wishing I could take back the biggest mistake of my life." Julian's laugh was bitter as poison. "Mistake? Is that what you call abandoning your own children?" "I was scared," Nathaniel whispered. "I was young and stupid and terrified of what people would think." "So you threw us away like garbage," Gabriel said, his voice deadly quiet. "You threw away our mother like she was nothing." "No," Nathaniel said desperately. "I loved her. I loved all of you. I was just too much of a coward to choose you over my ambitions." Julian slammed his fist on the table, making the documents jump. "Love? You want to talk about love? Let me tell you about love, father." The word dripped with venom. "Love is our mother crying herself to sleep every night for 5 years, wondering why her children didn't want to see her. Love is 2 scared little boys in foster care, holding on to each other because everyone else keeps walking away. Love is growing up believing that everyone you care about will eventually abandon you." Gabriel's voice joined his brother's, cold and precise. "Love is spending your entire adult life trying to prove you're worth keeping around, because the first man who was supposed to love you decided you weren't." Nathaniel felt like he was drowning. "You don't understand. I tried to find you after the first year. I hired private investigators, I called every adoption agency in Florida. You had just disappeared. Because we were in New York," Gabriel said. "Because our mother's cousin took us away when she couldn't care for us anymore. Because she was hurt in a car accident and the system stole us while she was unconscious," Julian added, his voice breaking. Nathaniel's face went white. "What car accident?" Gabriel and Julian looked at each other, and in that moment, Nathaniel saw the bond between them. They communicated without words, supported each other without question. They had become brothers not just by blood, but by survival. "She never told you?" Gabriel asked. "I never spoke to her again after that night at the hospital," Nathaniel admitted, the shame burning in his throat like acid. Julian's expression turned to pure disgust. "Of course you didn't. Why would you want to know what happened to the inconvenient woman and her inconvenient children? Tell me," Nathaniel begged. "Please, tell me what happened to her." Gabriel pulled out his phone and showed Nathaniel a photograph. Isabella Moreau, older but still beautiful, standing in front of a small art studio with a sign that read, "Moreau Gallery, Custom Portraits." "She rebuilt her life," Gabriel said quietly. "After she lost us, she spent 15 years searching. When the private investigators couldn't find us, she started an art studio and painted portraits of children for other families. She said it helped her feel close to us." Nathaniel stared at the picture, his heart breaking all over again. "She's beautiful. She looks happy. She was," Julian said. "Until the cancer took her 3 years ago." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. He doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "She's dead." "Breast cancer," Gabriel confirmed, his voice clinical and detached. Stage 4 by the time they found it. She had maybe 6 months. We found her 2 months before she died, Julian said, his own voice breaking now. We got a call from a social worker who had been helping her search for us. She was in hospice care, barely conscious most of the time. Nathaniel looked up at them through his tears. Did she know? Did she know you found her? Gabriel's composure finally cracked. She did. We got to hold her hand and tell her we loved her and that we never stopped missing her. But she died thinking we had chosen not to contact her for 20 years, Julian added, his voice raw with pain. She died believing her children had deliberately stayed away. No, Nathaniel whispered. No, no, no. She died thinking she was a bad mother, Gabriel said, tears now streaming down his own face. She died thinking she had somehow failed us. Julian's voice was barely a whisper. The last thing she said to us was, "I'm sorry I couldn't find you sooner." Nathaniel collapsed into his chair, his entire world crumbling around him. The woman he had loved and lost was dead. His sons had found her only in time to watch her die. And all of it, every moment of pain and separation and heartbreak, could be traced back to his decision to walk out of that hospital room 20 years ago. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her back," Julian said coldly. Gabriel stood up slowly, gathering the documents they had brought to destroy their father. "Sorry doesn't give us back 20 years with our mother. What are you going to do?" Nathaniel asked, looking up at them through his tears. Julian's smile was sharp and terrible. "We're going to do exactly what we came here to do. We're going to destroy you." "But now it's not just business," Gabriel added, his gray eyes exactly like Nathaniel's but filled with a coldness that Nathaniel had never possessed. "Now it's personal." They walked toward the door, leaving their father broken and alone in the conference room. But Julian paused at the threshold and turned back. "You want to know the real tragedy in all this?" he asked. Nathaniel looked up hopefully, desperately. "If you had stayed that night, if you had been even half the man our mother deserved, we would have grown up loving you. We would have been a family. Gabriel and I would have had a father, and you would have had sons who were proud to carry your name." Gabriel's voice joined his brother's for the final blow. "Instead, you chose your money and your reputation. And now your sons are going to be the ones who take it all away from you." The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Nathaniel sat alone in the conference room for 3 hours, staring at the photograph of Isabella holding their babies. His empire was about to crumble, his reputation would be destroyed, and his sons hated him with every fiber of their being. And he deserved every bit of it. If you're still watching this story, I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to think about the people in your life who love you, and I need you to tell them today. Don't wait for the perfect moment, don't wait until tomorrow, don't wait until it's convenient. Because time is the one thing none of us can get back, and regret is the heaviest burden a heart can carry. Leave a comment and tell someone you love them. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because what happens next will prove that even the deepest wounds can heal, but only if we're brave enough to stop running from the truth. The story hit the newspapers like a tsunami. Billionaire CEO exposed as deadbeat dad. Meridian Holdings under federal investigation. The abandoned twins who brought down an empire. Within 48 hours, Nathaniel Blackstone's carefully constructed world had collapsed completely. The SEC froze Meridian's assets pending investigation. The EPA launched criminal probes into environmental violations. 3 separate law enforcement agencies opened cases, based on the evidence Gabriel and Julian had provided. But the financial destruction was nothing compared to the personal devastation. Nathaniel's mother, the society queen who had influenced his decision to abandon his family 20 years ago, released a public statement disowning him entirely. His board of directors voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. His country club memberships were revoked. His charity board positions were terminated. He lost everything in less than a week. Gabriel and Julian watched it all from their shared office, monitoring the news coverage with the satisfaction of a job well done. Channel 7 is running a follow-up piece tonight, Julian said, scrolling through his phone. They want to interview us about what it felt like to bring down our own father. Gabriel looked up from his laptop where he was tracking Meridian's stock price in real time. Are we doing interviews? I don't know, Julian replied. Part of me wants the world to know exactly what kind of man he is. But part of me thinks he's suffered enough. Gabriel closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Do you feel satisfied? Is this what you thought revenge would feel like? Julian was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I feel empty. I thought destroying him would make the pain go away, but it doesn't. It just created a different kind of pain. I know what you mean, Gabriel said softly. I keep thinking about that photograph. The way he looked at it, like it was the most precious thing in the world. He kept it for 20 years, Julian pointed out. Yeah, he did. Gabriel stared out the window at the city below. I keep wondering what our lives would have been like if he had stayed. Different, Julian said simply. But we'll never know, will we? Their conversation was interrupted by Gabriel's assistant knocking on the door. Mr. Winters. There's someone here to see you. She says it's about Isabella Moreau. Gabriel and Julian exchanged glances. Send her in. The woman who entered their office was small and elderly, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a worn leather portfolio under her arm. Mr. Winters and Mr. Foster, she asked politely. I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I was your mother's doctor during her final illness. Gabriel stood up immediately. Dr. Rodriguez? Is everything all right? Oh, yes, dear. I'm sorry if I startled you. I came because there's something your mother wanted you to have, but she made me promise to wait until after her funeral to give it to you. Julian frowned. What is it? Dr. Rodriguez opened her portfolio and pulled out a thick envelope. Letters. She wrote one for each of you every year on your birthday from the time you were taken until she died. 15 letters each. Gabriel felt his knees go weak. She wrote to us. Every year, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. She would bring them to me for safekeeping because she said someday, when you came home, she wanted you to know that not a single birthday had passed without her thinking of you. Julian's hands shook as he reached for the envelope with his name written in his mother's careful handwriting. Why didn't she give these to us when we found her? She said she didn't want your first memories of being reunited to be about sadness, Dr. Rodriguez explained gently. She wanted you to remember her smile, not her tears. Gabriel opened his envelope with trembling fingers and pulled out the first letter. It was dated his 6th birthday, the year after they had been separated. My dearest Gabriel, it began. Today you turn 6 years old, and I wonder if you still remember the song I used to sing when you couldn't sleep. I wonder if you're happy, if your new family loves you the way I do, if you know that even though I can't be with you, I carry you in my heart every moment of every day. Gabriel couldn't read any further. He collapsed into his chair, overwhelmed by the love pouring from his mother's words. Julian opened his own letter, dated the same day. My sweet Julian, it read. I know you're probably angry with me for letting you go. You were always my little protector, so fierce and brave. But I need you to know that I didn't choose this. I would move mountains to bring you home if I could. Until that day comes, be good to yourself, mon ange. Remember that you are loved beyond measure. Both men were crying now, clutching their mother's letters like lifelines. Dr. Rodriguez pulled out a third envelope, smaller than the others. This one is for your father. She asked me to make sure he got it if you ever found each other. Julian looked up sharply. She wrote to him too. Just once, Dr. Rodriguez said. The day before she died. She said she needed to forgive him so her heart could be at peace. Gabriel took the envelope with shaking hands. Their mother's handwriting on the front simply said, Nathaniel. She forgave him. Julian whispered. Dr. Rodriguez smiled sadly. Your mother was the most loving person I've ever known. She said holding on to anger was like carrying a stone in your heart, and she was too tired to carry it anymore. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Gabriel and Julian sat in silence, surrounded by years of their mother's love. Each letter was a window into her heart, showing them how much she had missed them, how proud she was of the men she imagined they were becoming, how desperately she hoped they were happy. We have to give him the letter, Gabriel said finally. Julian looked up from his own reading. What? The letter she wrote to our father. We have to give it to him. Why? Julian's voice was sharp. He doesn't deserve her forgiveness. Maybe not, Gabriel agreed. But she gave it to him anyway. And if we don't deliver it, we're keeping her final wish from being fulfilled. Julian stared at the envelope in Gabriel's hands. I hate him. So do I, Gabriel said quietly. But I loved her more. An hour later, they stood outside Nathaniel's penthouse apartment. The building's doorman recognized them from the news coverage and let them up without question. Nathaniel answered the door looking like he had aged 10 years in the past week. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes red from crying. Gabriel? Julian? He looked confused and hopeful. What are you doing here? We have something for you, Gabriel said, holding out the envelope. Nathaniel's eyes focused on his name written in Isabella's handwriting, and he nearly collapsed. Where did you get this? She wrote it before she died, Julian explained. Her doctor brought it to us today. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he took the letter. She wrote to me. She forgave you, Gabriel said simply. Nathaniel invited them in, and they sat in his living room while he read their mother's final message with shaking hands. My dear Nathaniel, the letter began. I am dying, and before I go, I need you to know that I forgive you for walking away from us. I understand now that you were young and afraid, and fear makes us do terrible things sometimes. I want you to know that Gabriel and Julian grew into wonderful men. They are kind and strong and everything I dreamed they would be. If you ever find them, if they ever find you, please don't let guilt keep you from loving them. They need their father, even if they don't know it yet. Love them for me, Nathaniel. Love them the way I always knew you could. Nathaniel was sobbing by the time he finished reading. She forgave me. She did, Gabriel confirmed. But that doesn't mean we do, Julian added, his voice still hard. Nathaniel looked up at his sons, these two remarkable men who had every right to hate him. What would I have to do? To earn your forgiveness? Gabriel and Julian looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. We don't know, Gabriel said honestly. Maybe forgiveness isn't something you can earn. Maybe it's something that just happens when you stop trying to deserve it and start trying to be worthy of it. I want to try, Nathaniel said desperately. I want to spend whatever time I have left trying to be the father you deserved 20 years ago. Julian's expression softened slightly. It won't be easy. We're not children anymore. We can't just pretend the past didn't happen. I don't want to pretend anything, Nathaniel said. I want to face it all. Every mistake, every consequence, every year of pain I caused. I want to own it and try to do better. Gabriel stood up slowly. Then start by telling the truth. All of it. To everyone. What do you mean? I mean hold a press conference, Julian said, understanding his brother's thinking. Tell the world exactly what happened 20 years ago. Tell them about our mother, about us, about your choices. Let the truth be the whole truth. Nathaniel nodded without hesitation. Yes. Whatever you want. And step down from every position of power you hold, Gabriel continued. Turn your wealth into something that helps other families like ours. Done. And understand that forgiveness is a process, not a destination, Julian added. There will be good days and bad days. Days when we can stand to be in the same room with you and days when we can't. I understand. Gabriel looked at his brother, then back at their father. And understand that we don't need you. We survived 20 years without you, and we can survive 20 more. If we choose to let you into our lives, it's because we want to, not because we have to. Nathaniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. And I'm grateful for any chance you're willing to give me. As they left that night, Julian turned back at the door. One more thing. Anything. If you ever hurt us the way you hurt our mother, if you ever choose anything over family again, we won't give you a second chance to explain. We'll be done with you forever. I understand, Nathaniel said. And I promise you, I will never walk away again. The press conference 3 days later was unlike anything the business world had ever seen. Nathaniel Blackstone, once one of the most powerful men in America, stood before cameras and told the complete truth about his failures as a father and a human being. He talked about Isabella with love and regret. He talked about his sons with pride and sorrow. He announced the creation of the Moreau Foundation, which would provide resources for separated families and children lost in the foster care system. I can't undo the past, he said, his voice breaking. But I can try to make sure no other family suffers the way mine did because of fear and pride. The response was unlike anything anyone expected. Instead of mockery or condemnation, there was an outpouring of support from people who had experienced their own family separations, their own regrets, their own struggles with forgiveness. Gabriel and Julian watched from their office, and for the first time, they felt something that might have been pride in their father. He did it, Gabriel said quietly. He actually told the truth. Yeah, Julian agreed. He did. So what now? Gabriel asked. Do we forgive him? Julian was quiet for a long moment. I think we learn to. Day by day, choice by choice. The way Mom would have wanted. 6 months later, Gabriel, Julian, and Nathaniel stood together at Isabella's grave on the anniversary of her death. They came as a family, broken but healing, carrying flowers and memories and hope for a future none of them could have imagined. I wish she could see this, Gabriel said softly, placing white roses on her headstone. Maybe she can, Julian replied, surprising himself with the thought. Nathaniel knelt down and placed his hand on the marble stone. Isabella, I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for giving me sons who are better men than I ever was. I promise I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of the love you gave them. As they walked away together, Nathaniel between his sons, Gabriel asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. Do you think we'll ever really feel like a family? Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, then smiled. I think we already do. We're just a family that's learning to love each other despite our scars instead of because we never had any. Julian nodded slowly. Maybe that's the strongest kind of family there is. And as they walked through the cemetery together, 3 men who had found each other 20 years too late but still in time to heal, the setting sun painted the sky the color of hope. The revenge Gabriel and Julian had planned was complete. But it wasn't the revenge they had intended. They hadn't just destroyed a corrupt billionaire. They had destroyed the coward who had abandoned his family and forced him to become the father their mother always believed he could be. Sometimes the greatest vengeance isn't crushing your enemy. Sometimes it's giving them the chance to become worthy of your love. And sometimes, just sometimes, love wins. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own relationships or your own capacity for forgiveness, I want you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button because stories like this need to be shared. Second, subscribe to this channel because every story we tell here proves that no matter how dark things get, there's always a path back to the light. And third, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's carrying old wounds, or old guilt, or who has given up on the possibility of healing. Because the truth is, we're all just walking each other home. And sometimes, the longest journey isn't the miles between where we are and where we want to be. Sometimes it's the distance between who we were and who we have the courage to become. Until next time, remember that family isn't just blood, it's choice. And love isn't just a feeling, it's a decision we make every single day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in second chances. And thank you for proving that even in a world full of darkness, there are still people who choose to find the light.